bring them over to the opposite side of the truss where we'll be doing our battery remove and replace, and grab those foot restraints, grab that gap spanner chain, install it on the other side. And while Steve is doing that, Mike will go around and break torque on each of the 6 truss batteries, again with a ratchet wrench, similar to what Steve did on the pallet during EVA-1. Once they're complete with all of those prep activities, the first thing we need to do, this whole battery R&R is like a shell game, or one of those puzzles where you move the numbers around. The first thing you need to do is create an open spot to start your shuffle. So we'll install some handling aids onto the battery, first battery that we intend to remove, and then we're also going to install what we call a ball stack. It's a metal tether that can be rigidized to temporarily stow the battery during the EVAs. So there you see Mike putting that ball stack in place. Once that's complete, Mike will go ahead and ingress the foot restraint. We call Mike the truss guy, and Steve will be the pallet guy, because Mike takes all the batteries out of the truss and replaces them, and Steve will take the batteries out of the pallet and replace them. So here you can see they're working together. Mike's pulled the battery out of the truss, and then they pass it down to the temp stow location. We'll install it onto that ball stack, and then tuck it under the truss there to keep it out of the way during the robotics operations. And then Mike will reposition his foot restraint for the installation of the battery. At this point, Steve will guide the pallet that Piers is operating the arm there, guide the pallet in for the removal of the first battery. And the pallet gets close enough, he'll go ahead and open the thermal cover, install a couple more handling aids, pull that battery out. Here you can see them practicing that again in the pool. Training for this was challenging because since we couldn't put the pallet on the arm in the pool, we had to actually put the crew member on the arm and sort of do things backwards. So there's Steve pulling the battery out of the pallet, as he'll do on EVA-2. Once the battery's been removed, they'll work together to what we call shepherd the battery down to its install location. That's just basically a handoff from one crew member to the next, kind of inchworm it down the truss, and then install it back into the truss. These batteries are about 3.5 feet by 3.5 feet each, weigh about 365 pounds. So you can imagine there when Steve is holding the battery now, installing it back into the pallet, you can't see a whole lot more than battery. So it's really important for our other crew member, Mike in this case, to help guide the battery into its slot without hitting any of the other equipment. In between the first and second battery on the pallet there, we need to reposition our foot restraint and then reposition the pallet. That's to keep that bottom keel pin on the pallet from getting too close to the truss. Once that's complete, we go ahead and guide the pallet back in, again remove the battery, and then once more shepherd it over to its install location on the truss. And then one more time here, we'll move our foot restraint, remove the third battery from the truss, shepherd it back over to the pallet, and then Steve will install that battery back into the pallet. Okay, one more time, we'll guide the pallet up to the next battery. So here you can see the thermal cover closing on the second battery, guide the pallet down, install the handling aids, and then again remove the battery from the pallet and shepherd it back over to the truss to install it. So at this point we have 3 new batteries installed in the truss and 2 of the old batteries put back on the pallet for return to earth. At the very end there, the crew will retrieve that temp stowed battery and put it back into the pallet, close up the MLI, and the arm will then maneuver away to a clearance position where it will back out of the way so we continue to rotate the solar arrays in between EVAs 2 and 3. When that's complete, the crew's going to go ahead and do a couple of get-aheads for the next EVA. They'll reposition that ball stack at a different temp stow location. They'll take the foot restraint, move it up to the location that Garrett will use it to remove the first battery from the truss on EVA-3. And then we have a couple of tool bags that we took out on this EVA, and we're actually going to leave those stowed outside in between, so they'll stow those on the truss also. And then we're coming back inside. Okay, for the third EVA, goal is to